Good morning. I'm here with Michael St. John. This is part of the Crossing Point, conversations about how people move from survival into something more real and more powerful in their lives. Michael, tell me a bit about yourself and what you're focused on these days.
All right, well, let's see. The shortest way of introducing myself would probably to say that I'm a Renaissance geek of sorts. My academic background is in the physical sciences and engineering. I have been immersed in the sciences since I was at least 8 years old. So, and I've taken in the life sciences and psychosocial sciences and quite a lot more along the way. Um, and I've done a lot of things for work not in those fields. So my life experience tends to be fairly broad also. Um, what I'm focused on these days is um, learning how to do trauma healing for myself and others. I'm going through a certification process that's extremely rigorous that will give me access to more trauma healing techniques and ultimately perhaps a spot on a research team. And I'm also working on bringing this trauma healing work into the world of birth workers. I recently completed a year-long training, which is one of the top three in the English-speaking world. That's put on by an organization called the Matrona. The next one seems to be lining up for me is put on by Birth into Being. They're also really good, but they cover different experiential territory. And then I think after that one will be intentional birth, all the while working through the certification process with the Institute for the Study of Peak States, which is, it's a whole world unto itself and a very, very exciting one. We're talking about not just leading edge, but arguably bleeding edge research into consciousness, healing, and um, being all that we can be as human beings.
Sounds great. Thanks, Michael. And taking a little bit of a shift from your current experience in life, what about a time when things weren't working for you? What was survival like for you?
But it was really difficult to put myself in a situation where I was getting paid well to do what I really love doing. And that you know came to me as an almost revelation on the eve of my 10th birthday. I was quite young at the time. I've been through really harsh relationship breakups. The struggle was largely around finding a way to make a living that I really enjoyed doing and that paid well and that utilized my skills and my curiosities well. And it was just a situation of being overqualified for the work I could get and underqualified for the work that would pay me well. And that work also promised to be a bit soul crushing in one way or another. So it's just um, like wandering through a maze, a, like a deep labyrinth kind of maze, and not having a good map or how to create a good map. So just a lot of frustration, lots and lots and lots of frustration, but not the kind where I was like tearing my hair out. It was just like, huh, this again. So I didn't waste any opportunities, but had lots and lots of challenges.
Gotcha. Here at the Crossing Point, we're really focused on this journey from survival to conscious creation. And I have it that it's although it can be difficult to look at the problems, I don't want to talk about the worst parts of my life. I I would love our audience to get a sense of like many of them may be in survival right now, and understanding the difference. It's valuable to really get clear on, what does one look like? What does it look like to get out of survival? And I'm wondering if you were able to share, what was actually happening in your life at a time when you really felt like, oh, I'm in survival right now. What did day to day look like?
Um, well, there are actually several moments, but I'll touch lightly upon a few. One occurred in my early adulthood when I was moving from the area of Northern Virginia near DC, where jobs were plentiful, and it would be unheard of to take as long as 2 weeks to find a next job. It was just like really, really unheard of. One had to be like, beyond lazy. And moved with my then fiance to Missoula, Montana, thinking I was going to support both of us while she went to grad school. And it was so bad there, McDonald's was laying people off. I had to go on unemployment. It tore the relationship apart. And it took a big hulking chunk out of my self-esteem. Just like whatever I thought I could do, I just no longer thought I could do. It took me years to rebuild that. And even even recently, there's just, I've been told and I'm aware that I have a lot of potential, which arguably I do, and it's been hard to live into that. And so with the healing work that I've learned to do on myself, which is pretty phenomenal, that it's possible to do this level of healing work on oneself without the need of external support of any kind. Going through a relationship breakup, I was going through emotional flooding where I was in panic, dread, like existential dread, 12 hours out of the day. It's all my waking hours, and then the end of the day I'd start settling myself down. But the day after it started, I was reading a passage in a book, and it described this. It's emotional flooding. There's a name for it. People know how to manage it. So there would always be something. It's not like there was one abyss. There were many.
I'm curious, staying in these dark times when some things might have been working, some things weren't working. Thinking about that period, what actually would have made a difference? And this is from both the lens of like what you would needed for yourself, but also like what our audience could look at helping friends or helping others. Like what makes a difference for people in these dark moments?
The thing that really, really hit home is that when something is fresh, it helps hugely to address it immediately rather than to let it sit and bleed out in whatever way. So consider you've got a significant physical injury. Like you've got a broken bone. If you can have that set quickly, like within minutes of it happening, and then you put a splint on it, and then you go off to the clinic or doctor and get it looked at. And they say, well, yeah, that's definitely broken, but it looks like you got it set well. Let's just go to proper cast, or if it's a finger, let's just put a proper finger brace on and tie it to the neighbor and see how it heals. But if you have to then, don't do anything, you go to a clinic, you have to sit for hours and hours, and 6, 8, 10 hours later, finally the doctor gets to you and sets it. That's a lot of inflammation that occurs. And so immediate attention helps a lot. Now that's an analogy with a physical injury, but with emotional stuff, it's the same thing. If you can get to it immediately and do something about it and bring that internal emotional inflammation down quickly, you can get through it a lot easier. WTF easier. Keep it PG.
So responding to others or my own needs, especially my emotional needs quickly, it sounds like.
And it's not about, oh, you poor dear. It's not sympathy, it's empathy. It's like, wow, that's something serious that you're going through. How can I be present for you? What do you actually need in this moment? Sometimes we can intuit what the other person needs. Sometimes we have to guess. But when you guess, be open about guessing. It's like, oh, you need this? No. Do you need this? Do you need something else? You might get, a bit of a backslap, like, somebody's going to say, hey, that's not what I need. Well, okay, they're in pain. Just, take the feedback and, okay, well, tell me what you do need. Don't get upset because they're upset. It's just, counterproductive.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And then let's look at you're in one of these either abyss moments or dark night of soul, possibly when you're in this relationship and there's no work. What was one specific thing you did differently that actually started to shift things out of the darkness?
A grief support group. This was hugely, hugely helpful. I was in it for 9 months or more, and there was one other person in the group who was experiencing something as severe and deep as what I was experiencing. And it's kind of, what I was, given the length of my relationship, it was seriously out of proportion, but it was all very real. And, they had lost a spouse of 20 years suddenly and tragically, and I just, in shock and just, but they were experiencing the same depth of grief. And so, and nobody was judging anyone else and saying, oh, it's like your relationship was only this long. How do you justify having that much grief? Nobody was doing that. It was just being there for one another. And it helped. It helped a lot. Just to know that, hey, I could have some empathy from other people and know that what I was going through was not all that unique. And that there was an end to the tunnel and there really was a light at the end.
Gotcha. So let's explore that moment maybe. What we're doing here in the crossing point is exploring this transition moment. How do people get to a place where either they start to see the light of the tunnel or they get a sense that it's inevitable. I'm going to get through this. There will be an experience on the other side that's not like the one I'm having right now. Was there a moment when you knew things were going to change, that you weren't going to stay there?
There was a certain sense all throughout that I would get through it. Um, but there were times when I had no idea how long it would take. And so getting over the hump was, one key element was just recognizing that in the context of that relationship, I had an experience of actually subjectively feeling desired, wanted, positively desired, valued, that I hadn't had before in my life that I could remember. It's not that, somebody on the outside looking in would say, yeah, that you never had that until then. They might say you had that many times, but subjectively, it's like my eyes, emotional eyes weren't open to it until that relationship. And then, with it gone, I was in a very difficult emotional place. So I had to rebuild myself and just say, okay, I am desirable anyway. This one person is not the only source, the only possible source of that in my life. There can be someone else. And just building that within myself, it took the better part of a year of doing that every day, just affirming to myself, um, and being open to the possibility, occasionally, reaching out. Um, but yeah, it was just a long, hard slog at that time in my life. And I also, in the context, because I spoke earlier of the Institute for the Peak Study of Peak States, I actually had one of these peak states going into the relationship, one of the milder ones, known as inner peace, where the past just automatically goes into the past and stays there after relatively brief time. The breakup in this particular relationship kind of literally ripped that apart inside me. So I lost that sense of inner peace, and I was really raw emotionally a lot of the time. Even after I got through that particular abyss, it was another 6 years before I was able to access the process that allowed me to regain that inner peace. And it was through that institute and my association with them.
Okay, got it. And just to zoom in a little bit more,
Yeah.
what I heard you saying that you had a sense you're going to survive the whole time. So there wasn't a sense that like my life is over, it's ending or something like that. But was there a moment when you noticed your awareness shifting from maybe, mostly focused on the problem to more focused on the future? What are you able to zoom in a bit more and tell us what was happening right as close as possible to that crossing point?
How I found myself enrolled in the training to do this healing work. Um, this was COVID times. The an announcement had been put out about 6 months prior that there was going to be this first international symposium, and with an invitation for people to bring their stories in about their what they were doing with their healing work, any research they were up to. And I thought, well, okay, this is an opportunity. Things were coming together in my life enough that I thought, okay, it's a hassle that I need to get a passport to go to Canada now, but I can do it. And, because there was a time when all you needed was a driver's license, you know, either direction crossing the border, but things had changed. And so looking that like that was going to be good, and I may have had a close enough relationship with the person hosting that I could camp out in the backyard in a tent and it all would be good. It was that time of the year where it might be a little on the chilly side at night, but days were long and pleasant, and I had a good sleeping bag. So then COVID rolled around. That got looked like it just got canceled altogether. So I shelved my presentation, half, pretty much half baked. Good idea, but not fleshed out. And then a week before the thing was to happen, there's an email that showed up, said, "Oh, we're regrouping. We're going to do this in a week's time. Reserve your seats now. There will only be 100, and we're looking for presenters." And I thought, okay, well, I signed up right away, and then I waited for the presenter slots to fill up, and they weren't filling up. So the Thursday night before the event, I wrote the guy organizing it and said, "Hey, what do you think?" And this is my story, and basically taking these techniques and starting to use them in counseling on a pay-for-results basis. Nobody outside of the certified people in that institute does that, but I was doing it because the techniques were so effective, efficient, and reliable, it was worth doing it. And it was a selling point as well. So I've been doing it for about 4 years, and that was part of my story. The other part was my vision for bringing this out into the world. So Thursday night, I dropped it in. Friday, the day before it went live, I got an email back saying, "Looks interesting. We'll have a talk with the other, people in charge and see, what might come of it." Saturday presentations go through. Saturday afternoon, I get an email back saying, "You're on for Monday morning, 8:30." And so and that's Saturday afternoons, and the presentations go on for several hours during the day. So I'm thinking, okay, try to grab anybody I could, rehearse what I had, build it out, write it out more, and get myself some sleep Saturday night. Sunday, go through, and I'm noticing everybody has PowerPoint presentations. I've never put together a PowerPoint presentation before. I have the software, know how to view, but don't know how to create. So afterward, I spent all afternoon, all evening, all night till 5:30 in the morning putting together my first ever PowerPoint. Exhausted, I took a 2-hour cat nap, got myself up 7:30 Monday morning thinking I'm going to have an hour to prepare, look at my emails, and oh, by the way, we're bumping you up to 8 o'clock. My eyes go wide, my jaw drops, and it's like, okay, tank up on caffeine, be ready. I launch into it. I'm so nervous I forgot to set my timer. And when I got halfway through, I look for my timer, it's not there, look at the clock, and I've got 5 minutes left to go through the second half of the presentation. So I tell everybody, look, I'm going to put on my best auctioneer voice and get through the rest of the presentation as quickly as I can. I do it with 30 seconds to spare. Ask for questions, no questions. And then I sit through another 2 hours, 2.5 hours of presentations, sweating, wondering whether I just did a high-speed face plant in front of an international audience, or whether it landed so well people were just stunned. Right about that time, I got a chat message from one of the lead researchers saying, "Really love your presentation." So, big sigh of relief. A few seconds later, by the way, the guy who got this whole thing started many years ago also really loved your presentation. If there were any two people to impress, these were the two people. So I just relaxed a lot. At the end of that, day, which was the last day, guy made a request I connect with him on Skype afterward. I thought this was going to be the big group debrief. Turned out it was a private audience. And would I be interested in taking the training? Well, yes, of course, but I've got to figure out how to arrange the money for it. Well, talk to our director of training. He may be willing to work something out with you. Okay. By the way, you might have half Asperger's. That was a bit of a joke, but I didn't get it for hours afterward because I had it. And they had somebody who's trained to deliver that, and would I be willing to be a practice client? And so, yes, I said yes. And then a few days later, had the conversation with the director of training, and we were able to work something out. And it's like, okay, so when does the next one start? Oh, less than a week. In fact, it's about 4 days off. And it's like, or maybe 3 days off. It's like, again, my jaw dropped. And it's like, okay, I've got to pull everything together in 3 days. This is a big, it's officially a 6-month training. It's graduate level work. And here it is. I've got 3 days to prepare and dive into it. So it's like, okay. So, that's what a crossing point can look like when the rocket takes off and you don't even have your helmet on.
Makes sense to me. And just I'm thinking about people watching and they are in different stages in their lives. They may be in survival, maybe they've come to conscious creation, maybe they're near the crossing point and they're not sure, am I going to survive this? What's life going to be like? Just can you, as best as possible, can you describe what felt different? What was the moment when you're like, okay, maybe I will recover, I'll be back to normal or whatever that looks like.
You can call it a fog lifting. Fog, when it lifts, is kind of gradual. You'll see the sunlight breaking through, and you'll see patches of brightness here and there, and then then it all just kind of brightens up, and the sky clears. So it happened, in that gradual sort of sense, but not like it was super slow.
Okay.
But it took effort. It really took effort to get to that point. It's not something where I was just passively waiting for things to go away. I realized that if I'm going to get better emotionally, I've got to be doing things. And as is generally true of me, I'm always attentive, excuse me, attentive to my environment. The universe speaks to me, so to speak, and that things will show up, and I'm just alert to whatever shows up. And so, like a passage in a book, a friend says something, or a client, a customer says something, and it's like, oh, maybe I should give that a little pause for thought and let it sink in. So that's just, you can call it a life philosophy, but it's also a way of being. Just, being open to the possibility that the universe is speaking to me.
You spoke earlier a little bit to the question about what helps people in the moment, in the worst part of that. And now I'm just curious in general, what are the key things that helped you get from like the darkest point to, really, really functioning in life and getting towards or moving into conscious creation?
It's like trusting that the world that I'm in, even though it throws some severe challenges at me from time to time, is also sort of conspiring for my own good. Like there will be things that come along and they will support me. And it's just being willing to look for that. And I don't know if that's one of these peak states or abilities, or if it's something much more subtle or foundational than even that, but it's just that willingness to be willing to look out and say, what's there? What have I missed that I can see now? or what's coming through in this moment, what is speaking to me, who is speaking to me.
Okay, thank you. Now, moving a little bit past the darkness of survival and looking at, our in our hero's journey, kind of the journey upwards into the future, what's different about your life now in real ways?
Um, well, with a lot of the healing work that I've done on myself, um, I have brief moments of emotional distress, and I'm able to address them quickly, effectively, and efficiently with a high degree of reliability. They don't stick with me specifically because of the healing work that I've learned to do and being able to do it on myself. Most of the time, I run an even keel, even when I'm in extremely distressing situations. And there's also an emotional lightness that I've been able to recover, and an emotional, you could call it depth, that I've been able to recover, because for a time it's like subclinical dysphoria, if we want to get clinical and technical about it. But yeah, not severe enough to warrant any diagnosis, but there enough that it created difficulty in relationships. And so that's lifted. I'm just able to be more present. Um, Courtesy of the Institute, I discovered I had subclinical Asperger's and was able to clear that. So that means more access to awareness of other people's emotions, more access to awareness of my own emotions. And so that made it much easier to know how to respond appropriately in many situations. It made connecting with people a lot easier. Um, and it removed a lot of mystery, social and emotional mystery from my interactions with other people. So it's that willingness to be present to what's in front of me, to say yes when these opportunities show up. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm saying yes like one of these bobblehead dash ornaments, because of course, why wouldn't I? And other times it's like, just, jaw on the floor. It's like, oh my God, yes, thank you, right now. um, so yeah, these are, because I'm willing to be open to them showing up. Sometimes they actually do show up, and I could say, why didn't they show up sooner? Because if I had a lot of this stuff when I was a young adult or when I was a child, yes, my life would have been dramatically easier. But always better late than never.
That's as you kind of exit the darkness, the abyss, you're even looking beyond where you are now into the future. What do you see as possible for you in your life that wasn't before?
Um, what I see as possible, and it's still something that I have to work to create, is building a broader set of connections with people. With that comes a kind of, I'm cautious about placing these words on it, but I think there's some reality of an implicit support system that we all, through our connections with other people, build implicit support systems. And then there are the explicit support systems where people say, yeah, I've got your back. Implicit isn't about being able to show up in rags at somebody's doorstep and say, hey, can you take me in? I don't know that. That's one of those things where one doesn't just presume. But the implicit support system is just like the small favors that people can offer one another. That's more of what I'm thinking in terms of implicit. And the networking that people are able to do with each other in this way, I'm thinking of an area where I have little experience, moderate exposure, mastermind groups where people just hold a vision for one another of growth and development in some way, and that does seem to work. I'm somewhat familiar with the Power of Eight thing that Lynn McTaggart talked about. And so that kind of thing with the connections, the support groups, some are more implicit, some are more explicit, but being just more connected at a personal level, more connected at a professional level, and with people who are involved in creating a much more positive and supportive world where it's not about this corporate dog eat dog, I me mine kind of stuff. It's really creating something that's going to work well for everyone.
Okay. And looking at all the various experiences you had, both positive and negative, what has made this whole journey worth it for you?
Um, God, how long do you have? A lot of things have made it worthwhile. And it's the thing is, there are individual things that come up in the moment. Um, and I don't always know their significance. There's something I experienced like college days, where it's just a particularly beautiful sunset on the East Coast, where the typical sunset on the East Coast, and pretty much anywhere east of the Mississippi, the sun is this big red, orange red ball going down. But this time, very rarely, the air was super clear. It was sometime in October, and the sun was as bright going down over the horizon as it was at midday, and just feeling washed over me of whatever I had to go through to get to this moment was worthwhile. And it turns out that relates to a developmental moment somewhere around conception, which is one of the things I learned, and then also again refigured out on my own uh, from the healing work that I've learned from the Peak State Institute. But it's that kind of thing where every once in a while there's usually a mild revisiting of that, like, oh, yeah, this is really lovely here and now, this moment. Um, and so it keeps coming back. It's not like there's this one thing to blow everything else out of the water, or one thing that it's like the restaurant at the end of the universe, and we're just sipping our tea or whatever. It's life keeps sending these little reminders that you're doing well, you're on the right path, and keep going.
Well, that's great, Michael. Thank you. That was real and powerful. This is exactly what the crossing point is about, what it actually looks like to move through something and come out the other side. I really appreciate you sharing this.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope this is a contribution to other people's lives as it goes out into the ethers, so to speak. And just as a reminder, it can be dramatic as it did, coming out of that, you know, symposium and gaining access to the training, or it can be just very gentle and soft. So it can look like many things, and just you know, be open to that possibility, and definitely be open to it.